Hi, welcome to First Chapter Friday. My name is Lucy, and the book that I am going to be reading the first chapter of today is called The Civil War of Amos Abernathy, and this is by Michael Leali. This is the story of Amos Abernathy. He is a 13-year-old. He loves history, especially 19th century America, and he is a volunteer at a living history park. His mother is the manager, and his best friend Chloe also volunteers there. Amos is openly gay, and he's very proud of this, and he keeps a journal where he writes to a man named Albert, who was a Civil War soldier, who was a man who lived at the time of the Civil War and even fought in the Civil War, in fact, but was born as a woman. And Albert became a man before the Civil War and remained a man after the Civil War, unlike a lot of women at the time who would pretend to be a man to fight. Albert was a man, and Amos is really excited to discover this trans man in this historical time in America, but also frustrated because this is part of a story that is missing from everything that everyone is taught about American history. Amos says, "This is my chance to show the world I belong here and that I belonged back then. We can prove that queer people have always belonged. We just don't get the spotlight like we should." And so Amos sets out to create a project to find and then show these missing stories of marginalized people in American history. And Amos starts to think about how authentic the Living History Park really is. They pride themselves on being authentic to a T, but they wash over any of the uncomfortable or bad parts of history. Amos's best friend Chloe is Black, and he thinks to himself, what would Chloe's role really have been at the time of the Civil War? And Amos thinks about himself as a gay person and thinks, what would my life have been like at the time of the Civil War? And he feels like the Living History Park has an obligation to show the stories of all the people who lived at that time, no matter what those stories were like. And so this is the project that he and Chloe start. First, they have to find the people, though, and it is much harder than they think to research it. They're also working against the Living History Park. They're not sure they want to do this, and their town. They live in a pretty conservative town. Amos does dig up this information about Albert DJ Cashier, who was this Union soldier, who was a trans man 150 years ago. Amos first realized through this project how much adults really don't like discomfort, and they don't like to have the status quo challenged. And Amos really sets out to do that. And it's very admirable. And he learns along the way, too, some of his blind spots. And that's an interesting point in this book because it makes you realize that just being part of one marginalized group doesn't automatically make you an ally of all the others. This book is told in a really interesting way. It's told in chapters that all take place in one day, a year after the first letters that Amos is writing to Albert. So though the action is in one day, we get some chapters that are in the present day, and then we get some chapters which are Amos's writings to Albert. So those go back for the following year. But really the whole plot is happening in this day. And it's a really great way to tell this story because it shows you what Amos achieves, but it also shows you Amos's own personal evolution about the way he thinks about history. So I'm going to go ahead and read the first chapter of The Civil War of Amos Abernathy. 1. Sunday, August 15th, 2021. Dear Albert, writing letters to dead people isn't something I usually do, but this feels weirdly right. I don't know how to explain it exactly. It's like even as I wrote the words, Dear Albert, I felt like maybe, just maybe, you could hear me. Which I know is ridiculous, but I sort of need you to hear me. Ever since I was a little kid, like 8 years old, I've volunteered at the Chicory County Living History Park as a 19th century historical reenactor. People like to walk through the grounds and dream about that simpler time, but they have no idea. There's nothing simple about growing and harvesting and killing your own food or having to make anything you want from scratch. And don't even get me started on the lack of indoor plumbing. Not to mention slavery and racism and white people stealing land from Native Americans. I guess what I'm saying is, I get that life back then wasn't easy. Don't get me wrong, I love reenacting almost everything about it. When I put on my pioneer costume, it's like time traveling. For a little while, there's no cell phones or social media, and it's just me and a butter churn. The leaves are brighter, the sun's warmer, the birds are louder. I've always felt like I belonged at the Living History Park. You see, Mom's been the lead interpreter, which is sort of like the manager, since I was born, so it's always been a homestead away from home. She organizes all the volunteers and oversees restorations, and I've been by her side for almost all of it. The 19th century is in my blood. So maybe it's only natural that I have a 19th century pen pal. If I'm being honest, though, I didn't just decide to begin writing you letters. All of this started because of Ben Ogilvy. Maybe I should tell you about him first. I met Ben in March at this year's junior volunteer orientation, sitting in an icebreaker circle on the floor of New Hope Church, built in 1874. Most of us junior volunteers have been at it for years, but every now and then someone new shows up. Ben Ogilvy was one of only 2 fresh recruits. So of course Mom put them both in my group, because I'm essentially the one boy welcoming committee for any new volunteers. Yay for perks of being the boss's kid. Anyway, Ben's sitting across from me, all elbows and knees, chin nearly tucked under his arm like a chicken settling in for the night. Cool, I think. Another kid who doesn't want to be here. The other new kid, this pale freckled girl named Samantha, quit by the end of May. After we said our names and a pizza topping to match, I was Anchovy Amos, we went around and shared why we wanted to be historical reenactors. Samantha, my mom is making me. See what I mean, Albert? Ben, I like history, a lot. Okay, not a my parents made me do it kid. Maybe he's just shy? I could work with that. Yada, yada, yada. The get to know you questions went on until we got to my favorite one. What historical figure do you think you know more about than anyone else in the circle? Samantha, I don't know. No one? Ugh. Ben, Abraham Lincoln. I mentally crack my knuckles. Abe, one of the most famous people from Illinois, is my guy. So I said, let's see what you got. When was he born? February 12th, 1809, in Kentucky, near Hodgenville. I didn't ask for the city and state. A bit of a show-off, but okay. How many siblings did he have? 2, Sarah and Tommy. The other kid's eyes bounced between us as I fired off another question. The longer we went back and forth, the more excited I got. Somehow, I ended up crouched like a frog. Ben, though, he started to unfold, limbs relaxing, stretching out. Since it looked like he was getting too comfortable, I lobbed a real corkscrew. Abe's in the Hall of Fame for what athletic event? This was the first time I saw him smile. Kind of crooked, goofy, but he held my stare. Wrestling. I fell back on my behind and smiled. Bingo! After that display, he pretty much had no choice but to be my friend. I pegged Ben as shy, but it turned out he's just one of those quiet, observant types that's thinking a million miles a minute. And all of his thoughts are deep, existential thoughts, not just, I think I want a turkey sandwich instead of ham. It might be because he's homeschooled, but I don't want to stereotype. Lucky for me, Ben and I were able to work most of the same shifts. Knowing the person in charge does occasionally have its benefits. I introduced him to my best friend, Chloe Thompson, and it was instantly like the 3 of us had always been together. Ben and I went to most of Chloe's softball games in April. The 3 of us became regulars at the ice cream shop downtown. He and Chloe really bonded over their shared passion for coconut ice cream. Ew. We even have a pact to shave our heads if any of us decides to ditch our friend group. Just kidding. But we so would. So, okay, here's the other thing about Ben. Wow, this shouldn't be that hard to say, but I mean, I guess I've never said it about anyone I actually know, so okay, Amos, you got this. Here it is. Ben's cute. Like, really cute. He's a little taller than me and white with blonde hair. He has eyes like old pennies, and I mean that in a good way. There are a million shades of brown, copper and chocolate and mud, and they're always watching. Sometimes when he's working on something, I just like to watch him paying attention to whatever he's doing. He's got a dimple on his right cheek, a square chin, and there's something about the way his neck meets his body, like he just comes together in this seamless way that's smooth and sharp all at the same time. But it's his collarbone that really does it for me. There, I said it. Albert, I've thought before that boys in general are cute, but I've never said a specific boy is cute. Honestly, I didn't even think Ben was that good looking at first. The weirdest thing in the whole world changed my mind. It was mid-June. Oh my God, this is going to sound so dumb. Albert and Chloe, Ben, and I were at the LHP walking from the Wakefield house, this grayish building that used to be a doctor's office, to the homestead. Ben had a stick, and he was dragging it along the wrought iron fence, which Chloe legit thinks is beautiful. She's obsessed with anything that comes out of a blacksmith shop. And then suddenly he had two sticks, and the tick, tick, tick turned into tick, tick-a-tock, tick-a-tock as he drummed along the posts. I laughed. What are you doing? What's it look like? The sticks jumped from the fence to my shoulders. He grinned and said, making music. I shook him off and called him weird, still laughing. But that was the moment. It was like waking up. My heart wouldn't slow down. I got goosebumps. It was weird. I felt weird. So now it's been months of this me watching him watch things thing. I don't know what to do. I feel like I should have good gaydar, but maybe I'm not gay enough. I don't know. I've been out since 4th grade, but living in the semi-rural Midwest really puts my abilities to the test. I mean, I've got the internet and I've watched all of Glee twice, so I know some things about being gay, but it really wasn't until middle school that I had a sort of community. Our gender and sexuality alliance is awesome, and my friends from the GSA are cool, but none of them are super into history like I am. The point is that I've only had so much practice around people like me, so I'm not always sure how to read other people or talk about gay things. Then, a couple of weeks ago, this happened. It was Saturday. Ben and I were sitting on the porch of the Wakefield house. We were playing jacks and laughing about something, and then we both reached for the ball at the same time, and our fingers touched for half a second too long to be normal. I pulled my hand back right away, afraid he might freak. Stuff like that's happened to me before. But his hand kind of stayed there, and then he looked up at me with his penny eyes and just stared. My cheeks felt like toasted marshmallows. I couldn't read his expression, so I blurted, "What?" He shook his head. "Nothing." I shook mine right back. "No, not nothing. Why were you looking at me like that?" "Like what?" "I was just, looking at your face." I thought to myself, okay, he's either way weirder than I realized, or... His hand pulled back, dragging a jack between his fingers. His right knee bounced. "I just mean you have a nice face," he added quickly. "Thanks?" Birds chirped. My heart thrummed in my ears. A trio of elderly white women walked by and waved. We waved back. They kept walking. Then I made things even more awkward and said, "You also have a face that is nice." "Albert, you also have a face that is nice?" This is the point where I wanted to crawl under the porch and die from embarrassment. But before I could ooze away, Ben said, "You really think so?" "I mean, yeah, you have a really nice face. Not that I'm the judge of all faces or that my opinion counts for anything, but wait, what? Are you laughing at me?" I was saying way too much. Sometimes that happens when I'm nervous. His lips twisted into a squiggle, but he couldn't keep the smile from his eyes. They were wide and shining and still watching me. "No, I don't know, I really like your face," he said. I leaned back. The single jack wove between his fingers. He watched it roll over his knuckles, and I watched him watching it, hoping for some clue about what I should say next. I got nothing. Finally, I said, Are you saying what I think you're saying?" He twisted to the side like he was cracking his back, but I'm pretty sure he just wanted to make sure we were alone. He spun around. "What do you mean? What are you saying?" My words fell out a syllable at a time. "I think I'm saying that maybe I like your face as much as you might like my face, and that by like, I mean like, not just like, like." Ben's chest expanded with an inhale. He got all pale. His head nodded over, and his breath came out in a slow, steady stream. Oh, he sounded hurt, offended. I panicked. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. I didn't mean to. He shook his head. No, Amos, I'm not. He swallowed. And now my insides were screaming. Run, find a hole, bury yourself for all eternity. The end. I pushed off the porch and said, never mind. He called after me, Amos, where are you going? I didn't mean. Bathroom, I yelled, not looking back. Urgent. I hate to do this to you, Albert, but the situation has become urgent again. Be right back. And that is the end of chapter 1. I think that Amos has a wonderful narrative voice. He's very funny. He's self-deprecating. He tells a story in a really good way, and it's all very entertaining to read. And something that the author does through Amos in this book is provide a descriptor for every character. So a physical descriptor that might include their skin color or race, their sexuality, their gender, no characters being othered through description. This is a refreshing change, I think, to see in a book, to see all the characters described, not just the characters that are typically marginalized. There's a wonderful set of resources in the back of this book, and the author has a note that I definitely think is worth reading about why he decided to write it. I would highly recommend The Civil War of Amos Abernathy to anyone, but I think especially to those questioning identities or their place in history, or looking to find strength to stand up, to speak out for themselves, to speak out for others. This book provides a real role model for that. So I really hope that you give it a try. That's The Civil War of Amos Abernathy by Michael Leali. Thanks for joining me.